Welcome to the Daily Dispatch. First up, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's marathon trip to G7 countries has culminated in the US. We'll give you the highlights in the backdrop of geopolitics. And Iran's top diplomat is ready to restore ties with its regional rival, Saudi Arabia. We'll give you a background. We're here to give you news and to help you infer the world around you. I'm Usama Nizamani, and here's your Daily Dispatch. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's marathon trip to G7 countries has culminated in the US. He began his tour in Europe by meeting French President Macron, with both countries reaffirming their commitment to stand against Russian aggression in Ukraine, and concluded it by signing a defense agreement with the United Kingdom, which will allow Japanese and British forces to exercise in each other's countries. The last week has seen a flurry of diplomatic and strategic engagements between Tokyo and Washington. First, the Security Consultative Committee, also known as 2+2, was held between the cabinet members of both states. Then a summit took place between the Japanese Prime Minister and US President Joe Biden. These engagements covered a spectrum of issues: alleged Chinese threat, Russia-Ukraine war, reaffirmation of the US-Japan Defense Alliance, and expanding its space cooperation, and reiteration of their commitment to enhancing defense and strategic cooperation to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Kishida raised concerns about growing Chinese activities near disputed islands in the South China Sea, called Russian aggression against Ukraine a threat to international order, and urged his US and European counterparts to stand against these threats. This was the first high-level engagement between the two states since Japan announced to change its pacifist policy foreign approach it had adopted since the end of the World War II by increasing security-related spending to 2% of GDP. According to some estimates, it will take Japan's military budget to more than $50 billion per year, making it one of the highest in the world. As the US pivots to Asia-Pacific and global power competition increases, Japan's role becomes more indispensable. Japan is part of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, also known as Quad, which many analysts consider as anti-China. Its stance on the Russia-Ukraine war has been aligned with the West, and maritime disputes with China only entrench Japan's defense ties with the United States. These developments portend more geopolitical competition in the Indo-Pacific region. We'll now give you news about the possibility of relations thawing between two regional giants of the Middle East, Iran and Saudi Arabia. During a news conference in Beirut, Lebanon, the Foreign Minister of Iran, Hossein Amir Abdollahian, expressed hope to restore diplomatic missions with Riyadh. This comes after Iran's foreign minister met with his Saudi counterpart, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, on December 21st, marking the highest level of public contact between the two countries since they cut ties in 2016. Saudi Arabia cut diplomatic ties with Iran in 2016 after protesters attacked its embassy in Tehran, responding to Riyadh's execution of a prominent Shia cleric, Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr, over charges of terrorism. Since April 2021, Iraq and Oman have hosted multiple rounds of talks between the two countries. One significant outcome of these talks was the reopening of Iran's representative office at the Jeddah-based Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. The sixth round of direct bilateral talks was expected to be held after the two states last engaged in dialogue on April 25, 2022. However, since then, it has been delayed several times, both due to Iraq's internal political turmoil and Iran's accusations of Riyadh supporting the protests in Iran over women's rights. The two countries have been traditional rivals, with both of them aiming to achieve influence in the region and tensions of competition playing out. Both have accused each other of being involved in proxies and undermining peace and stability in the Middle East, such as Iran's alleged support to the Houthi rebels against Yemen's government and training and sending of militias in Syria, and Iran's allegations of Gulf countries sabotaging the nuclear deal and their alleged support to extremist groups in Syria to undermine Iranian interests. These continued signs of bilateral engagement open a window of opportunity for both countries to hold dialogue on key issues such as Iran's nuclear deal, the war in Yemen, and reciprocal accusations of fomenting instability in the Middle East region. Let's take you to North Africa and Tunisia, where protesters are marching against what they call President Kais Saied's increasingly authoritarian rule and demanding the fall of the regime. The protests are taking place on the 12th anniversary of the Arab Spring Revolution that ousted President Ben Ali. President Kais sacked the government and suspended parliament in 2021 after nationwide protests on the looming economic crisis. And on the July 25, 2022, he held a referendum that gave him sweeping new powers as a president, including removing checks from the legislative and judicial branches. The opposition party and civil society filed lawsuits against this referendum, terming it a move back to the de facto dictatorship. President Kais announced elections on December 17th, which many say proved to be a sham, with the election turnout being as low as 11.2% of the Tunisian public, the second lowest worldwide voter turnout in an election ever recorded in 1945. The protests are not only happening in the back of disastrous elections, which are rescheduled to take place on January 29th, but also the rising inflation, impending economic crisis, and high unemployment. Back in the 2011 Arab Spring, the first demonstrations had taken place in Tunisia, when a small vendor self-immolated himself in protests against the harsh treatment of government and security officials, triggering a wave of mass movements in the Arab world. Today, after 12 years, the people are coming out again to remind their leaders of the power of the masses. Next on the dispatch, in a private meeting on Friday, the United Nations Security Council urged the Afghan Taliban to end its restrictive policies, banning women from education and work. Since coming into power in August 2021, the Afghan Taliban has carried out a series of repressive measures against women. First, they reversed a decision to allow girls to study in secondary schools. And last month, they officially banned women from universities, eliciting an outcry from human rights organizations and states, including the United States. Many Afghan experts see these developments as detrimental to Afghan Taliban's quest for international recognition. The international community has been pursuing a policy of wait and see, and has urged them to live up to their commitments of not replicating their governance model of the 1990s and denying terrorist organizations a safe haven. While humanitarian aid continues to flow in Afghanistan, it is feared it will not be enough to ensure durable economic and political stability if not followed with investment and regional trade and connectivity. Such repressive measures will scuttle any prospect of economic revival, and the suffering of Afghan people will continue and will create instability, with spillover effects for neighboring countries and the world. And lastly, a senior police officer, along with 2 constables, embraced martyrdom in a midnight militant attack on the Sarmad police station on the outskirts of Peshawar, with the assailants employing modern weaponry for the first time in such an assault. The terrorist outfit Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan claimed responsibility for the terror attack. 2 hours later, following up on intelligence information, 2 of these militants were gunned down in Shinwari Killa in the area. The operation included an intense exchange of fire, with 3 terrorists reported to have fled. Arms and ammunition have also been recovered from the site, while a search operation in Sarmad and nearby areas is now underway. Pakistan's Afghanistan bordering province, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, has increasingly been under threat from the terrorist outfit that continues to operate through Afghan soil. And this development comes as a fresh challenge for the country's counter-terrorism efforts. The use of advanced equipment, such as thermal goggles and snipers, has been cited as the reason for the loss of life in the attack on police personnel. The government has responded by purchasing 40 thermal goggles, with 20 already being dispatched to the Banu and Dera Ismail districts. However, this rising threat will require a more comprehensive and coordinated efforts from the state. That's all, folks. We'll be back tomorrow with more bite-sized news that keeps you up to date with what's going on in the country, the region, and the globe. I'm Usama Nizamani, and this was your Daily Dispatch.